بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yesterday we were looking at chapter entitled Reality of the Resurrection. It's on page number 3 in the text. And we came across a series of verses in Surah Qaf, 31 to 35, talking about paradise and the hereafter. And your homework assignment was to look into those verses, read the translation, and possibly read a little bit of the commentary. Did you guys come up with anything?
I looked it up a little bit. Talks about the one who's going to get the paradise is going to come with the heart that is full of repentance.
Good.
And I think the last ayah says that they can have whatever they wish, and with us is more. One of the commentaries said that more is the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the heart that is munib, the munib will get.
Oh, very good. That's great. So just to add to that, expound upon it a little bit, it's a summarized kind of explanation here, but again, the verses 31 to 35, here Allah says, وَأُزْلِفَتِ الْجَنَّةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ غَيْرَ بَعِيدٍ, and paradise will be brought near to the righteous, not far away. So أُزْلِفَتِ الْجَنَّةِ, basically meaning that the paradise will be brought near, al-Jannah will be brought near, so that the dwellers of paradise here, lil-muttaqin, the pious, they can witness paradise and they can see what it contains of all the everlasting joy and bliss, the happiness that they will experience in paradise. And it was brought forth or drawn near to the pious by Allah. And the pious are those that they do not commit any type of polytheism or association of partners with Allah, shirk, whether that be minor forms of shirk or major forms of shirk. The pious are also those who take heed to the commands of their Lord, and they fulfill them. They fulfill those commands. And because of that, it will be said to them in a manner of greeting, هَذَا مَا تُوعَدُونَ لِكُلِّ أَوَّابٍ حَفِيظٍ. Basically, as is mentioned here in the translation, this is what you were promised, meaning paradise and all of its bliss, etc. This is what you were promised for every returner to Allah and keeper of His covenant. Every returner to Allah and keeper of His covenant. Here, هَذَا مَا تُوعَدُونَ لِكُلِّ أَوَّابٍ حَفِيظٍ. This paradise and everything that it contains, everything that you could possibly desire. Your soul is, whatever the soul's delight or whatever could bring comfort to the eye, it is what Allah has promised. A web here is a person that constantly returns back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every situation at all times. And they do this in a number of ways. So this is some practical advice. How is it that you can constantly be turning back to Allah? Number one is remembrance, a dhikr. Is that you have a very robust regimen of dhikr. And that will come up later in different forms. So you are consistent in, like for example, morning adhkar, evening adhkar, the basic supplications and remembrances that are made like when you wake up and when you go to sleep, when you put on your clothes, and when you go out, when you get in your car. And there's so many things that can be said, but the pious person, the one who is striving to attain paradise, is going to develop themselves in this regard, because that's what's going to keep you coming back. When Allah is on your tongue, in your mind, in your heart, you'll constantly be coming back to Allah. But when Allah is absent of your remembrance, then it's very likely that you will become heedless of Allah and certainly of His commands and orders. So making, exerting efforts, making an attempt at remembering Allah regularly is very important here in this regard for someone that is awab, constantly returning. Also, your love, having love for Allah. And having love for Allah is giving Allah priority, essentially. The things that we love, we give priority to. We give our time, we spend on, we're interested in knowing what makes them happy and what makes them upset, what makes them angry, and we cater to that, those that we love. And so it's important that if we love Allah, we give that credence to what makes Him happy and what makes Him angry. And then we cater our actions to that. We conform ourselves to that. Also seeking His assistance. Seeking His assistance in everything, be it little or something major, asking, making supplication, having fear, and also having hope. So living a balanced life with these emotions. Being fearful that Allah will not accept and will punish sin, and being hopeful that Allah will accept good deeds and will pardon sin. So you have to have a balance. It says Hafiz here, which is the keeper of the covenant. The keeper is the one who keeps to Allah's commands by performing them in a sincere way, to the best of their ability, seeking to perfect the performance of Allah's commands. Also preserving the limits or the boundaries, the difference between the halal and the haram, that you're very mindful of that. You make your decisions based on that because you're hafiz, you're a safeguarder, if you will, of Allah's commands. So when it comes time, for example, to eat, you're going to make decisions to safeguard the commands of Allah. So you're going to only consume that which is halal, even if you're hungry and even if it looks great and it's delicious and it's marvelous and it's so, tempting. You're more interested in safeguarding Allah's commands than feeding your own desires. And so those are the types of decisions that have to be made. And believe it or not, there are little decisions like this throughout the day. There are little decisions, and it's the little decisions that are very important. The little things that we do constantly and continuously. After that, the verse he says, "Man khashiya ar-Rahmana bil-ghaybi wa ja'a bi-qalbin munib." Man khashiya ar-Rahman, basically, who feared the most merciful. Khashiyah here is not so much fear as it is reverence. It's reverence. It's a combination of having awe, being fearful, but the fear and the awe is based on a person's awareness of Allah, their ma'rifah. They're having a level of awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also having hope in His mercy. So this is what khashiyah is here. Man khashiya ar-Rahman, the one who has reverence of the most merciful.
As against khawf.
As opposed to khawf, which they're similar, but there are some nuances here, which we'll talk about later. So here he says, خَافَهُ عَلَى وَجْهِ الْمَعْرِفَ بِرَبِّ. Basically, there's a fear, but it's due to their intimate awareness or knowledge of their Lord, وَالرَّجَاء, and also having hope, لِرَحْمَتِهِ, due to His mercy. And then with that, khashiyah, that reverence, they're consistent. فِي حَالِ غَيْبِهِ, right, when they're alone. This is key. This is the true reverence, is when you are by yourself. No one can see you. You're not being watched. And if you are, if you can maintain this state of being, in awe of Allah while you are by yourself, then this is real khashya. As for the khashya that you can observe and display in front of people while they are present, then it's likely and there's a potential for that to actually be a type of riyat, which is, boasting and bragging, showing off, or sum'ah, which is basically like the same thing, dealing with your, my reputation. I have a reputation to protect. And it's only a reputation for the public. And these things aren't actually indicating any real khashya. But the beneficial type of khashya, the real type of sincere khashya, is that which is observed when you are alone, and as well when you are being watched and witnessed by other people. He says, وَجَاءَ بِقَلْبٍ مُنِيبٍ, and he comes with a repentant heart. A person's constantly repentant to their Lord and Maker, their sustainer and provider, and they are always trying to please Allah. And it will be said to that type. So those were a number of categories, or a number of descriptions, I should say. We had a couple of descriptions there. The descriptions were every returner to Allah and keeper of His covenant, person who fears Allah, whether they're in public or private, and their heart is constantly repentant. So we had 4 major descriptions. And for that type of person that's able to actualize those 4 qualities, it will be said, and these of course are the pious people, "Udkhuluha bi salamin." Enter it with peace. Right? Enter paradise coupled with peace and tranquility, and tranquility from difficulty and hardship. You'll be happy, safe from the nightmares of the hellfire and punishment. And you will be entering into a garden that is eternal. There is no sever from its bliss, no end to its joy. There's no tire and there's no hardship. ذَلِكَ يَوْمُ الْخُلُودِ, he said, this is the day of eternity, which never ends. There's no death after that. He says, لَهُمْ مَا يَشَاءُونَ فِيهَا, they have whatever they wish within it. Everything that you could ever desire, it will be there for you, as well as an abundance, mazidun, as was mentioned by Mr. Qazi here. Mazidun, an abundance or something extra, which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the extra reward that Allah, the merciful and ever merciful, will extend to the pious. And this is what no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, nor anyone could ever imagine. And the most amazing of those abundant rewards, the best of them, is to look upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to be able to gaze upon Allah azza wa jal. And that is when the hijab of Allah, which is from light, as we said that Allah is light, He's a nur, and His hijab is light, it will be removed, that hijab. It will be removed. And it will be such that you will be able to gaze upon Allah. As mentioned previously, it's not possible now. The nur of Allah it would burn everything as far as the eye could see if it wasn't for that hijab. But then in paradise, it will be such that the people of paradise will be able to look upon their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will find bliss and joy in this. This will be the most exciting thing to experience. And also to hear His words and to be close to Him. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those people. And this is essentially a summarized explanation of these verses, Surah Qaf 31 to 35. That's important because the next chapter on page number 5 is salvation of piety. So we see in this verse that paradise will be brought near to al-muttaqeen. And so salvation is found in taqwa, basically. And this is what the Imam Ibn Shaykh al-Hazzamiyyin, he says, if you want, O friend, to be saved from the horror of that day, then prepare for it by having taqwa, by having piety. Now we have to understand what is taqwa. Okay? Similar to some of the descriptions that we just read about in Surah Qaf. He says, protecting the limbs from that which Allah the Almighty has prohibited. Number one. So taqwa is not just about what you do, but it's also about what you abstain from. There's two elements here. That which you do and that which you intentionally do not do and you avoid. Protecting the limbs from that which Allah the Almighty has prohibited. So this is what you intentionally avoid and abstain from. The impermissible. Allah has prohibited certain things from us. And it's our job to observe piety by refraining. The second side of that, he says, in performing that which Allah has commanded you to do of the physical responsibilities. Right? You know, the actions that we're required to do, obligated. Prayer and fasting, giving charity, good manners. There's a multitude of things that we're asked to do. Some of them are required, some of them are recommended. And all of this can be found in the books of Islamic law or jurisprudence. He says, that which is permitted and forbidden, the legal rulings and judicial boundaries, such that there will not be in your record a single missed prayer, a single missed fast, an obligatory charity that is due. So now you're talking about some of the rights of Allah, that you fulfill these obligations. These are religious obligations, prayer, fasting, charity. And then also he goes on and he says, having bad-mouthed a Muslim without right, or having contention, enmity, or hatred without right. So now you're talking about some of the rights of the servants of Allah, that you refrain from backbiting and gossiping and lying and slandering and holding a rancor and enmity and hatred in the heart for another believer without right. There are some situations in which that is appropriate. There are situations in which it is permissible to backbite. If you need a fatwa, for example, or you have to warn someone you have to make public something for the safety of the community. For example, if someone is asking for someone's hand in marriage, then you can divulge certain things so that it's not a train wreck in the near future. So, you don't want to go with this person, they don't pray. You don't want to marry this person, they're terrible sinners. It won't work. Then that's obviously backbiting, because you're uncovering faults of people, but in this situation it's permissible. Also, having anger and enmity towards someone is permissible at times, even a person of faith. They may be deserving of such a thing due to some infractions, breaking the Islamic law, etc. However, you can see that the spectrum of rights are covered here, the rights of Allah and the rights of His servants, so that you're fulfilling their rights and you're not oppressing them. And this is a part of being pious. He says, strive to completely absolve yourself of any due rights between you and Allah, and also from that which is between you and the rest of His servants. Only then, if Allah wills, will you join the company of the righteous or the exemplary. So this is the salvation of piety. The next part here, and it should be noted that Ramadan is the great month for piety. It's a training ground of piety. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, He says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Very famous verse. It's a very famous verse is found in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 183. Allah says, "O you who have believed, observe fasting. It's prescribed for you as was prescribed for those before you, that you may become pious, that you may adopt and attain taqwa." And that taqwa is exactly as described by the Imam. It is, it is doing what is obliged and staying away from what is prohibited, in essence. The next chapter is important that we cover this today, page number 7. The Imam, he says, if you want to be from the circles of the elite scholarly mentors, then you must seek the knowledge of prophetic traditions, hearing and gathering it, And finally, narrating it whilst seeking reward from Allah Almighty. Right, so in order to know what is halal and haram, in order to obtain taqwa, you have to know what you have to do and you have to know what you have to abstain from. It's not something you're born with. You're not pre-programmed with the do's and the don'ts of our tradition, but you have to learn that. And so where do you go to learn that? You go and learn that from those that possess that knowledge Allah has blessed them with through their pursuits of study and academic endeavor. And so not only do you go and sit with them, but you try and emulate them and be with them and be like them. The scholars that are like mentors, Rabbaniyyin, they not only have the Islamic knowledge, also the character coupled with that, but they cultivate people upon piety. It's not just a purely academic pursuit, but it's a very practical pursuit of knowledge so that it can be applied. And this begins with prophetic traditions. Studying the prophetic tradition, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ through his hadith, listening to them, collecting them, narrating them, and all of this is done seeking the reward of Allah. He says your intention should be to learn the religion of your Lord and the prophetic way, ﷺ, such that you will be one that does good actions, meaning you've learned and now you implement. Learning about Islam and not implementing it is not beneficial. It's not helpful. It's just theory. And our religion is not a religion of theory. It's a religion of action. It's a religion of deeds and doing. And all of that has to be based on knowledge. So that's what we're after here is beneficial knowledge. He says, and so that you are compliant with the commands of the Messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam. The second part here of this chapter is extremely important, and I hinted at it earlier about developing a healthy, robust regimen of dhikr. Also is dua. The Imam says you should also allocate a daily wird of authentically reported supplications. The wird is like a litany. It's like a regular, a regular practice that you have. And sometimes we'll have the little dua books or apps on our smart devices, Muslim Pro or My Dua or etc. You'll find there's a section that has the duas that can be said throughout the day and for various occurrences. And so you want to allocate something from that for yourself as a regular practice of dua. So we had the dhikr, but they also need the dua. And we're looking at the authentically reported supplications from the Prophet ﷺ. So we're talking about, right, the key to the saintly path. We're talking about traversing the path of the awliya, the wali, someone that Allah is pleased with, protects, preserves, as opposed to the opposite, adu, which is an enemy. And of course, the enemies of Allah, they are not safe from Allah. Allah's anger. So the Prophet ﷺ is reported in Sunnah Tirmidhi, he said, إِنَّهُ مَنْ لَمْ يَسْأَلِ اللَّهِ يَغْضَبُ عَلَيْهِ, that whoever does not ask Allah, Allah will become angry with them because they've abandoned Him. They've abandoned Allah. And not asking Allah is a form of arrogance. Takabbur. It's a type of arrogance that you feel like you are not in need of Allah, so you don't ask. It shouldn't be thought that I'm too shy to ask. I'm embarrassed to ask the Almighty, the Majestic, the Supreme Being, because I'm a sinner and I'm lowly. It's no, that's what Allah's there for. Allah is there to be asked. And He loves when His servants ask of Him because it shows that they have trust. It shows that they have faith that Allah is going to deliver. Allah is going to deliver them. Allah is going to fulfill what it is that they want. And so the wali is not someone that Allah is angry with. And so therefore, they have adopted a regular practice and habit of making dua. The great Imam Ibn Qayyim, he said that this hadith, this idea, this concept that Allah becomes angry, it indicates that Allah's pleasure or happiness with a person is when they are asking Him and they are obedient to Him. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with His servant, it's all good. It's all good. But when He's displeased, then that is exactly where you will find affliction and hardship in the anger of Allah. He also mentioned, it's something important to note, Imam al-Qayyim, he said that Allah only gets angry when a person leaves an obligation or performs something haram. They leave a wajib or they do something which is haram. So in essence, making dua in general, asking Allah, is an obligation. It's a religious duty. It's not just a preference, it's not just a voluntary act, but it's actually in general a religious duty that we ask of Allah. And so we should make abundant dua throughout the day. It's reported by Imam Ahmad in his collection of hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَا مِن مُسْلِمٍ يَدْعُو بِدَعْوَةٍ لَيْسَ فِيهَا إِثْمٌ وَلَا قَطِيعَةُ رَحِمٍ إِلَّا أَعْطَاهُ اللَّهُ بِهَا إِحْدَى ثَلَاثٍ. And he said, there's not a Muslim that supplicates with a prayer so long as it does not contain a sin or severing of family ties, except that Allah will give one of three things in return. So the supplications, they have to be good, not sinful supplications. One of three things. He says, either tu'ajjala lahu da'watu, that his supplication will be granted immediately. Whatever you asked for will be granted immediately. Or it will be stored away for you later, fil akhirah, in the hereafter. Or some evil or affliction equivalent to what you asked for of good will be removed from your life. You will be protected from that. So it's just a win-win scenario. Just asking Allah, either you're going to get it now, you're going to get it later in paradise, or He's going to protect you from some type of difficulty which is equivalent to whatever you asked. So the companions, they said, إِذَا نُكْثِرُ, should we then be abundant in dua? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahu Akbar. We used to hearing Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater. But they said, should we be abundant? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah is more abundant. Meaning Allah, it doesn't matter how much you ask, you're not going to exhaust the provisions of Allah. So you can't ask for enough. Essentially, you can't ask for enough. But lastly here, which we'll conclude with, he says, and another wird, or regular litany, if you will, for sending salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ, saying sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this is a command from Allah, found in the Quran. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. That Allah and the angels, they send salutations upon the Prophet. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Oh, you who believe, send peace and prayers upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So when Allah sends salat upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He's exalting his position. He's exalting his rank. And the saints, or the awliya, they are able to traverse the path to Allah by way of the Prophet ﷺ. It was the Prophet's guidance. It's only through the Prophet's guidance that you can come to know Allah. And therefore, you have to constantly be returning back to the Prophet ﷺ and his guidance. And in order to, for encouragement, it's another thing that has to be remembered constantly, and to exalt the Prophet ﷺ and to elevate his position, and to study his life and his seerah and his teachings. And through that, you will find Allah. And that's where it begins. And the Imam here, Imam al-Wasiti, in another one of his books, he dedicated an entire chapter on how you can get to know Allah. The ma'rifah. How do you achieve ma'rifah of Allah? And it begins with the Prophet. It begins with the seerah of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. He says, whilst spiritually present, picturing him as if he is in front of you with love and extreme respect of his magnificence. He says, I hope that with this, the blessings and extreme glorification of the Prophet ﷺ will enter your heart. And I also hope that you'll be granted his love and the love of following his example, because this is the pinnacle of all good, if Allah so wills it. جزاك الله خير وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله.